Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about menopause. It's not a subject we like to think about, but we're going there. Julie's going to share her hysterectomy story, dispel some rumors about hormone replacement therapy, and generally make all of us in the decade leading up to menopause feel a whole lot better. We'll also talk about all those perimenopausal symptoms many of us are experiencing. Sleepless nights, hot flashes, short tempers, and more. Let's get started. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, Marie.
Morning, Mindy.
Hey, good morning, girls.
You guys, I'm so excited about this topic, and it sounds like a weird one to be excited about, but I'm excited to maybe take the veil off it and learn something from our resident expert, Julie, here today. So, listeners, today's topic is a subject that most women in the middle years feel a little dread about. Menopause. We're scared of horror stories and fears that will turn into sweating monsters that yell at our families and can't sleep. Mm-hmm. There's really never a positive stance that I've seen in the media anywhere. And so we grow up fearing it and burying our head in the sand. Today, we want to talk about all those misconceptions. We want to talk about the fear, the dread that women feel. Julie is a pharmacist, and she's also had a hysterectomy. So she's going to tell us her story, and she's going to try and explain hormone replacement therapy, maybe dispel some of the misconceptions and rumors around that. I know that I am just going to be sitting here probably asking the most basic of layman questions, but that's because nobody ever talks about this stuff.
It's true. It's true.
Well, and I think a lot of people think, I'm really not old enough for that because menopause tends to hit in your 50s, but it can start a full decade before. So, Mindy.
Yeah, I'm pretty shocked. Like, you guys you said that we were going to talk about this, and I was like, well, that's a long ways away. That's for old women, is how I felt. Like, that's my mindset of menopause. You say menopause, I'm like, that's not me. Yeah. And I have so many years before I have to think about that. So, yeah, this was like, okay, it's time to learn about it.
You're getting a jump on that.
Yeah, I feel like what I usually hear, it's the years, like menopause, and correct me if I'm wrong, is defined by 12 months without a period. Right. And so until you've gone 12 months, you can't say that you've reached menopause. But it's all those years, like Julie said, it can start a decade before. It's those years that lead up to it are the ones that are full of all the symptoms that we all dread, the sleeplessness, the hot flashes, the short temper, all of that kind of stuff. And so even though you might only be in your 40s and you think, oh, well, I still have a while. Yes, you do still have a while until you get to that 12-month mark, right. But you don't have a while until all these perimenopausal symptoms.
Yeah, I was going to say that your phase is still given a name, perimenopause. So yeah, it's a real thing.
Okay, so this is really fascinating to me because I always felt like I had children so young as compared to my friends. And women are still bearing children now. Mm-hmm. The childbearing years have gotten later and they've been extended with modern medicine and
right. I mean, you can still have a child in your 40s, even though you're having those perimenopausal symptoms.
Right.
Yeah. As long as you're having periods, you can get pregnant.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
So see, there still is something here for you today, Mindy.
Can't deny it.
And I think the first thing that I've noticed about perimenopausal symptoms is the sleeplessness. And I know that you guys haven't struggled with that, but around 40, it got to be where I would wake up at that dreaded 2 or 3 a.m. and not be able to get back to sleep. And every doctor I've ever mentioned it to, they're never concerned. They're always like, that's just a part of your age.
I think it really is important to talk about it because menopause is a phase. It's a transition from one biological phase to the next, kind of like puberty. The more that you start to recognize those symptoms, like your insomnia, you can realize, hey, I maybe am starting into this phase. And it can be a really good wake-up call to maybe make some changes before you're actually in full-blown menopause. For example, like if you're a smoker, this would be a great time to quit because the risk of stroke doubles every decade after you turn 55. So 55, 65, naturally it does. So you don't want to be smoking in that phase of life, or you don't want to be having a really poor diet and high cholesterol and high blood pressure. So I think when you see these symptoms start, this would be a really good chance to maybe make some changes so that you're the best prepared you can be when it finally hits. All right, if that makes sense.
Before I hit adult puberty, from what you're telling me, that was a little more fun to say. I would love to know some of the other symptoms, maybe those perimenopausal symptoms to be watching out for.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hot flashes, you hear a lot about that. Irregular periods, because the hormones that control that cycle kind of can get out of balance. So that can cause it to happen more often, or heavy or light periods. Insomnia, Marie, you mentioned that. I see this one listed a lot, brain fog.
How do you know if you have brain fog? Like if you have brain fog, are you going to know it? I don't know.
Other people will tell you.
Oh, got it.
I've left my phone in the refrigerator or my keys in the fridge, so maybe I have had that symptom.
Okay.
Depression, anxiety, mood changes, and skin changes and dryness. So have you guys experienced any of those?
Well, I probably don't know if I've experienced the brain fog. I feel like women throughout their lives, when they have brain fog, first they blame it on pregnancy. Then they blame it on being a new mom. Then they blame it on, there's so much going on. Now we're going to blame it on menopause.
No.
I know.
I am really resistant to just, I don't know, when I hear somebody say, it's hormonal, I've always kind of, I don't know, prickled at that. Like, no.
Right. But seriously, aren't we saying now that we're hormonal our entire lives? Like we're going through something at all times.
And we just blame it on that.
We might as well talk about it. I mean, seriously, I don't know if I've had some of these things because life changes can also affect, some of these things. Yeah. Having extra stress or moving, adding a child, children leaving the house, which we've talked about, all the things that we're experiencing right now in this stage of life. So it's hard to know. With Abby leaving, I'm sad about that. Am I depressed? I don't think so. But I mean, I've had more periods of sadness in the past year. I'm coming out of that. That also happens the first year you move someplace. You deal more with that.
Well, I guess if it's persistent, maybe, once those issues change or things get resolved, if it's persistent, then you might be able to attribute it to hormone changes.
I think, like with something like that, if it hangs on after the period of time has, you've adjusted to it, then okay, I just don't feel like myself. There's something going on.
Yeah.
So
I think like once I turned 40, I had the insomnia, and then also, you hear your whole life, PMS. Blame it on that. I never really had much in the way of cramps, or it never really affected me that much. But man, after 40, I'm telling you, I can hardly control myself and my anger like the day before I get my period.
Oh, wow.
And I don't always recognize it, but I'll just have a blow up. And then the next day I'll get my period and I'll be like, It's like I just, that is a definite thing.
Okay.
I think
You've noticed.
Like all those PMS symptoms, I think are much more there now in my 40s than I ever had like as a teenager, 20s or 30s. And it really is, I think it really does affect your mood.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about your mom's experiences? Like, do you remember them going through that transition time? Is there anything remarkable about their experience that kind of stuck with you?
If my mother ever talked about this, I would fall over dead on the floor. Like, we just never talk about stuff like this. She's probably listening now. And that's okay. But I mean, we just have never had that kind of relationship in this area.
Right.
And you haven't noticed anything.
I mean, I don't know. If I did, I probably buried it like all kids bury those things about their mother.
That's just mom. I do have a funny story about something. And my mom didn't tell me for years later. But of course, I told you guys I was married young. My mom was early 40s when I got married. We had just moved to Missouri like the year before. And that was a place she really struggled living with at first. here I am getting married. And she told me years later that she was actually afraid she was pregnant during that time
Oh my goodness.
of me getting married. And I'm the baby, the last one to leave. And so she was really concerned. But I just know that at that time, her body was really changing.
Right.
There were some heads up about, about her periods becoming more irregular and her having that fear. I'll call it fear. Maybe that led to a little anxiety for her when I was getting married, but I never knew until years later. So,
right.
Well, my mom had a hysterectomy when I was 6. So I do remember a lot. She had a lot of, I guess, some emotional things that were going on, kind of a roller coaster of things, and I remember she did take estrogen. She had to give herself a shot.
Oh, wow.
I think it was every week. And I just remember being horrified by that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And just how long she had to live that way, because I think she was probably, she would have been 36.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So
wow.
That's a long
just
time.
yeah.
So, Julie, you probably had a lot of intrepidation talking about menopause, having watched your mom go through that.
Yeah, it didn't seem like a very pleasant thing at all.
No,
Especially the shot part.
The shots, yeah.
So basically, none of us have any positive experiences. So we're here today to maybe give some hope to our listeners. All right. So Julie, what kinds of symptoms were you having?
I feel like I didn't have a lot of the symptoms that are common, other than really heavy bleeding and irregular periods, but I don't feel like I had gotten to maybe the other symptoms before my surgery.
Okay, well, why don't you start telling us about your story? What led up to it and your whole surgery and all that?
Well, I was having some irregular periods. Like I would occasionally skip one. So I thought, this is normal. And then I would notice that I started having them more often. So I'd only go maybe 2 weeks in between. And then it just got heavier and heavier and heavier. And my doctor had informed me that I had what's called fibroid tumors, which are non-cancerous tumors that are in the muscle of your uterus. He said they were small, nothing to worry about. Like, we're not going to do anything. We'll just watch them. And that was probably 10 years, before all of this. We just followed them and didn't worry about it too much. But then once the bleeding started getting so heavy, it really started affecting every area of my life, like what I was going to wear. I only wore dark clothes and jeans, put away all the white clothes. Mm-hmm. Sitting for long periods of time, like riding on an airplane, that would have been the worst. I actually couldn't have done my Europe trips. I couldn't have done it had I not had that surgery. And then just the unexpectedness of like when it was going to hit and it was going to be bad, wearing a bathing suit, those sound like kind of trivial things, but I did that for 2 years before I finally said, okay, I'm ready. I've had enough of this.
Yeah. That keeps you from living.
Yeah. It was kind of what I had to consider before I did anything.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was your doctor saying, okay, we can go ahead and do something, but you were fearful?
Yeah, he said, you might want to consider a hysterectomy. And I thought, oh, well, that's major surgery. I don't know. I think I can just live with this, because I was late 40s. And he told me that, the average age of onset of menopause is about 52. So I just kept thinking, if I can make it to that point, the tumors usually shrink after menopause because of the hormone decrease, and I'd probably be okay. So I just kind of in the back of my mind kept thinking, I think I'm just going to hold out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can avoid surgery, I can surely do this a little while longer. And so at the last appointment, he said, you realize you're only 49, you're only 50. You might have to live this way 2 more years. And really, even it could be longer, because I wasn't really having any symptoms of menopause yet.
Oh, wow.
So that's when I thought, 2 more years, maybe even more of this. No,
Right.
I'm done. So
what kind of a surgery did he say it would be?
Right. Did you have any other options, to try to fix it? Or is it really just he encouraged straight hysterectomy?
Well, there are some other options to hysterectomy. They can do what's called an ablation, where they go in and destroy the endometrium, which you can't get pregnant after that. So that wouldn't have been a problem with me. I'm not sure why he didn't recommend that, other than that maybe they can come back. I'm not sure. A myomectomy is where they just surgically remove the tumors out of your uterus.
Okay.
like leaving your uterus so that you could still become pregnant. But I think the tumors still could come back. And then they can also use some hormone treatments to kind of shrink the tumors and minimize the bleeding. But that's not really a long-term solution. They just use that to shrink them maybe before your surgery. He didn't offer me that. So I chose to have a robotic-assisted laparoscopic vaginal hysterectomy.
Okay, interesting.
Wow.
And what that means is the robotic part is they use these thin instruments that are inserted to your abdomen. Like I had 3 little tiny incisions. The instruments are all computer controlled. Like the doctor is monitoring it, but he's actually not controlling the instrumentation. They basically unhooked everything through these little incisions, and then everything was removed vaginally.
Okay.
The uterus, including the cervix, the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, I had everything removed. And one thing my doctor told me before my surgery was that my fibroid tumors were fairly large. And so if they were too large, they might be too big to remove vaginally.
Wow.
And he said, hey, if that's the case, do you give me permission, to go ahead and make an incision and remove those? Which I did, because I didn't want to be woken up to find out that nothing was done.
Exactly.
Right.
So I did give him consent to do that, but thankfully they were able to do it that way.
That is crazy because I'm sorry, it's not like your body is preparing to have a baby and you're
Right.
dilating.
Right.
Like
Right. True.
And some people's tumors can be the size of grapefruits and melons. I mean,
Wow.
you can
rid of those.
you can measure like 20 weeks pregnant. You could.
I was gonna say
It
you
can be
could drop
pretty large.
some weight. Dude. This is sounding like a really good idea. You're gonna drop a pant size.
I did actually.
So, Julie, so you're saying they took everything. Was there a choice? Like they could have left some things, but do some people just have the uterus out?
They could have just removed the uterus. A lot of women just have a real problem with them taking their ovaries.
Okay.
Because, my ovaries were still functioning to produce estrogen.
Right.
But my doctor said, think about it. You're probably going to hit menopause in 2-3 years. So these ovaries are going to be totally obsolete. That leaves you with your risk for ovarian cancer.
Oh.
He said, if I were you, I would see no reason for hanging on to them. Just go ahead and remove them while you're having the surgery.
Oh,
And that made
makes
total
sense.
sense to
Yeah,
me.
That really
Now,
makes
if you
sense.
were 35, that's a totally different story. You've got 17 years
Mhm.
of estrogen production that would be beneficial to you. So
Right. That totally makes sense. So what was your biggest fear going into surgery?
well, other than that I'd never had surgery before.
You
That
never
was the
had
fear.
any
Okay.
kind of surgery?
No,
Never been put to sleep at all?
other than wisdom teeth, but that's not really
Wow,
general
that's
anesthesia.
amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a little scary, but the main thing I was concerned about is who I would be when I woke up. My doctor when we talked about hormone therapy, he was very convincing that I should replace my estrogen with, a medication, a supplement. Because he said, think about it. You've had estrogen since you were 13 years old. It's kind of what makes you you. It provides a lot of what makes you what makes you have a sense of well-being. And that just really scared me to think that I wasn't going to go through any kind of gradual change. I was just going to wake up and boom, everything was going to be gone. And I really thought, what if I am just crying uncontrollably and I'm this monster? Like you said, Marie, that was really scary. Like, what if I'm just a totally different person? He was very assuring. And I remember I woke up with an estrogen patch on. So I didn't even have to go through any time period without it. And then I transitioned to an oral medication before I left the hospital. And I've really never felt better. And I've never had one symptom of anything, So I would say my only regret is that I didn't do it sooner. And I know hindsight is 20/20. I don't know if I would have been ready 2 years earlier than I did it. But looking back, I think, I wish I hadn't lived those 2 years with those horrible symptoms when I could have fixed it.
Right.
I am so impressed and also just amazed at modern medicine. I'm thinking back to all the poor women that didn't have these medical practices and the surgery and even like the estrogen patch, and it's just amazing. So I'm actually feeling a little bit better about this adult puberty business. Now that I know that there's plenty of possibilities out there to continue to lead a normal life. And I love your life, Julie. Like, you are truly living. And so to see you now, I would never have guessed that you had gone through all of this because you work out, you eat well, you're living your life. Like, you're not a monster. You're very nice.
We don't run the other way in fear.
You're really enjoyable to be around. And
it's the estrogen, not me.
Let's talk a little bit about people that may try to go through this naturally. So we heard from a woman once at our church, got up and spoke to a women's group. And I think she was definitely talking about her period of life, her stage of life, and she was going through perimenopause, leading up to menopause. And I think every woman in the room walked out of there in fear for their lives.
Oh, I was so depressed.
And what about it was depressing to you, Julie?
I just thought, this is all I have to look forward to, because I love my sleep, you guys. Like, I seriously thank God every night for how comfortable my bed is, and then I get to go there and sleep.
Yes.
And then I fall asleep and just wake up the next morning. And I just thought, I don't know how I would live without that, or all these other things that were happening too,
I mean, she
hair
told
loss,
us,
weight gain.
Yeah, she told us about like waking up at like 2 or 3 in the morning and like cleaning out every cupboard she had. And then she would be in a terrible mood, and she had weight gain and just like, I don't know, it just seemed like suffering.
And like weight gain in spite of no dietary changes and still exercising as much, like beyond her control kind of thing.
Yeah, like everything in her life, I felt out of her control.
Right.
Like you couldn't regulate it because you think, oh, well, I'll just tell myself this is menopause and my mood will improve. But like you can't make your mood improve.
Right. Yeah, it seemed like something had taken over and that there was no way to fix it.
So once we get to that 12 months without a period and we're in menopause, then what effect does that have on our health?
Osteoporosis, higher risk of bone fractures. Your risk for cardiovascular disease like stroke, heart attack goes up. So those are the big ones.
Is there anything we can do to prevent or treat those types of symptoms?
It's really important to be active. And for women, it's important that they have weight-bearing exercise because using your bones against weight increases the bone density. And I think that includes walking. That is considered a weight-bearing exercise. But lifting weights, things like that is good for you. Just eating well. And if you have hot flashes, avoiding alcohol, that can make that worse. Or if you have insomnia, obviously avoiding caffeine. And I know there are some other options. I have a friend who has used acupuncture to help with her symptoms of menopause. There's relaxation techniques, a lot of behavioral changes like that. Many women choose to use dietary supplements. I know black cohosh is a big one that is recommended for menopause to help alleviate some of those symptoms like hot flashes and stuff. But one important thing that I'd like to say as a pharmacist is that it's really important to always tell your doctor when he asks you for what medications you're taking. A lot of people think they only want to include their prescription drugs, but it's very important if you're taking a supplement like that to tell your doctor and your pharmacist, because those drugs do interact with prescription drugs that you might be on. And they can even affect lab tests.
Oh, okay.
So don't just dismiss it as, it's not that important. It really is important.
Right. No, that's a good point.
And then the biggest thing is hormone replacement therapy.
When I think of hormone replacement therapy, I think of like growing up and seeing interviews on Oprah. This is causing cancer. This is terrible.
Right.
And so in your mind, you think hormone replacement therapy equals death.
I know. And that really makes me sad. And I'll explain that here. Up until 2002, women regularly took hormone replacement therapy for symptoms of menopause. And they were given it to prevent heart disease and osteoporosis. But everything changed when there was a study done called the Women's Health Initiative. And I think it started back in the 90s, early 90s. And it was a huge clinical trial to try to determine whether hormones really did help women, have a decrease in heart disease and osteoporosis. But there was a link of the hormone replacement therapy with an increase in breast cancer and an increase in heart disease in the study. But the study really focused on older women Like most of the women in the study were over 60, and they were having a slight increase in breast cancer and heart disease. But the problem with the study is then they generalized that to all women, like in their 40s and 50s. So really younger women who really could still maybe benefit from hormone replacement therapy, who were appropriate candidates for it, were basically kind of thrown under the bus. The media kind of got a hold of that and ran with it and kind of incited a lot of panic. They actually stopped the trial 3 years early. The risk for cardiovascular disease is very low. And this is what we're talking about. Like they had 20 adverse events out of 10,000 women. So your actual individual risk is very low. And those results weren't what they call statistically significant. In other words, it's likely that those were caused by random things, not the drugs themselves. And they didn't factor in to consideration pre-existing conditions. Like maybe those women would have had heart disease anyway. They had a risk factor for that or something that we don't know about. And what was statistically significant in the study was that hip fractures and colorectal cancer risk was decreased. And it is still the most effective way to reduce the symptoms of hot flashes and night sweats and all those other symptoms we talked about. Most experts today, after reanalysis of all the data, believe that really millions of women were misled when the results were exaggerated and totally misunderstood, kind of for publicity's sake. The media picked up on that narrative that, oh, this hormone therapy causes breast cancer and heart attack, and it just kind of stuck. A good way to think of it, too, is like I said that the study focused on women over 60, but then they extrapolated those results to younger women. A good way to think about it is, say you were going to have a trial to see whether exercise was good for your heart or not. And you put 70-year-old women on a treadmill and cranked it up really high. Well, of those women are probably going to have a heart attack, right?
Right.
But you wouldn't be fair to extrapolate that to 40-year-olds and say exercise is bad for your heart.
Right.
That's kind of what happened in the study, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Most experts now say for younger women under 60 and for short term, the lowest dose that relieves symptoms and for 5 years or less, starting within 10 years of menopause. So it was dangerous for women who were 70 to start this therapy way far from menopause and too old. That's what the analysis showed.
So what do they expect you to do after your 5 years? Are you okay then? Like when you're done with your 5 years, Julie, what will happen to you?
Right.
What will happen to me?
Yes. Will we still know you?
Are we going to be okay?
The monster will come out. No. Well, most people find that after 1 to 3 years on hormone replacement therapy, and if you're having controlled symptoms, like it's working for you, that kind of the worst has passed and that they can come off of the hormone therapy. Some women stop it abruptly and have no problems. And some doctors prefer to gradually reduce the dose. And you could even do a trial. Like I'm going to try stopping the therapy and just see how I feel. And then if you don't feel good, you could go back on it. It's not rocket science. And so my doctor said, let's talk in 5 years. I mean, I still see him every year, but it'll be 3 years this November.
Talk a little bit about the actual medication. What is it?
Yeah. Do you have to give yourself shots?
Or is it made from animal products or we don't know anything, Julie?
That's right.
The estrogen is estradiol that I take, and it is similar to the estrogen in my body that I produce on my own. It is made in a lab.
Because I hear the word bioidentical. What does that mean?
Bioidentical means that the hormones in the product are chemically identical to those your body produces. But so are many of the traditional commercially available ones. Natural, sometimes you hear bioidentical natural, means it comes from plant or animal sources, that they're not made in a lab. But some of the commercially available ones are plant and animal source as well. And the ones that are natural, they come from a natural source. They're still heavily processed and altered in the lab before they are marketed, as a preparation that you can take. So I don't put a whole lot of stock in those two terms. And this is kind of a fallout from this study, this panic that arose in 2002. First of all, because of the study, hormone replacement therapy plummeted by 80%. So 80% of the women that were taking some kind of hormone quit taking them. And for women who stopped, that risk of hip fracture has increased 55%. And then lastly, there's just been this explosion in the market of unproven alternative treatments. And I say that just because the bioidentical natural hormones are not FDA regulated. Many of them are compounded in a compounding pharmacy. Sometimes they are not FDA approved estrogens. I just don't feel like there's any reason to expect that non-FDA approved compounded hormones have different risks than the FDA approved ones. Like, women are really scared by the black box warnings that come on the FDA approved hormones. Like, it's this big black box saying this is known to cause breast cancer and heart disease from that study. And then they don't see the warnings on the bioidentical hormone. So you would naturally say, oh, well, I'm going to choose that one.
Right.
But it's only because they aren't required to put it on there because they're not FDA approved or because they don't have to meet FDA approval. So it's really very faulty logic to think that's a safer drug.
Well, there's so much out there. How in the world do you make an informed decision? You know, how would you go into this? Do you talk to your doctor about all of these things? You know, you kind of have to choose who to trust, I think.
Right. My doctor did just offer me estradiol, which is a commercially available product from a pharmaceutical company. But I did do my research on bioidentical hormones because that's just all you hear about. I mean, you can't listen to the radio without hearing advertisements. And so I wanted to know what the difference was. With the study and then the whole fear of the breast cancer and the cardiovascular risk, if these are truly bioidentical, then you shouldn't expect a different result from those either. That's really not what the study was about, that they weren't natural hormones, so therefore they cause breast cancer and heart disease. The risk will be the same with the natural or the commercially prepared ones. And also, I'm not saying that they're harmful. I'm just saying there's just more uncertainty. When a product is compounded, there's just less quality control. Like between each pill, you might have more in one, less in the other, or each time it's compounded, it could be slightly different. And some of the estrogens on the market that they use are not FDA approved. That's all I'm saying.
People like Mindy and I. Mindy's a little further from this, but let's talk about me. Okay, so I'm 47 and I'm within 5 years of what you said is the average age of menopause. So say a couple more years go by and I am like that woman that we heard speaking at that retreat. I can't sleep. I'm, gaining all kinds of weight. My hair's falling out. I'm cleaning all my cupboards in the middle of the night. I'm so mad at my family. Like, what should I do, Julie?
Okay, if you're in perimenopause and you're still having a period, then what your doctor would offer you is a bit different than what we've been talking about.
Okay.
He would offer you some kind of cyclical combined product, which is basically like what birth control pills are. You would take an estrogen every day, and then for 14 days, you would take a progesterone too. And every month, you would have a regular bleed. And what this is doing is this is a higher, more potent dose of the hormones because it is basically taking over your hormone production and shutting it down and then giving you this nice steady level of hormones in your body.
Right.
Like, when younger girls are having very irregular periods, they'll often put them on birth control.
Right.
They want to kind of shut down their ovaries and give it a rest, and then you'll be getting the hormones from the drugs, not your own body.
Okay, so why wouldn't I just run out and sign up for this? Like, this sounds good to me. Like, okay, I'll be able to sleep again. Like, what would be the downsides? What would be the downside of this?
My doctor did not ever offer me that because I really wasn't having those symptoms. The older you get, the risk for birth control pills goes up for like stroke, things like that, blood clots. So it would really kind of depend on your risk factors and your history as to whether your doctor would offer you that. Like, they're not risk-free. So it would really, to me, it would just be how bad are these symptoms? You know, like if it was causing problems and I just really having a hard time, I might consider it, but I just wouldn't treat that very lightly. You know, I wouldn't just go sign up for something like that if I could find other ways to alleviate my symptoms.
Because, I mean, really, Marie has a lot of life left to live. And so isn't there a time limit? Like if she were, for instance, to go out and say, hey, give me some hormones, I really want to sleep at night. Well, does she fit into that? You can only take them, you know, for really 5 years is what they
that would just be postmenopausal. That would be counting postmenopausal.
Okay. Well, it's nice to know that maybe there's that in your back pocket. Maybe you have to wait and see how bad the symptoms get.
Yeah. Or you might need to go to the doctor.
Yeah. And if you're a smoker, if you have a history of blood clots, you have a history of stroke or cancer, your doctor's most likely not going to offer this.
What about the rare birds, or maybe they're not even that rare, people that just transition over to menopause with no hormones? How, what percentage of people do that?
Yeah.
I don't know. You never read about those people. I do have a friend, though, who I asked because she's about 7 years older than me. And she goes, I noticed it, but for about 5 minutes, she said.
I just feel like that's so lucky.
I know. And then I have another friend who's like, for the last 15 years, I've known her to be going through hot flashes and insomnia and all this. So
no,
I don't know. Maybe there are more people that have an easier time and we just don't hear about them.
Like you don't hear about this. Yeah.
Well, and I've heard, this may be an old wives' tale. I'm not pretending to be a doctor here, but I've heard like if your PMS symptoms were mild, and that wasn't a huge problem, then maybe your menopause will be somewhat like that. So I don't know if that's true or not, but
right. Well, do you have any information on like what percentage of women require hysterectomies like you had?
So I don't know how many women end up with hysterectomies, but about 30% of women have fibroids by the age of 35.
Oh, wow.
And 80% of women have fibroids by age 50. They could be non-symptomatic, but they're there. So that's pretty high.
Like you wouldn't find out unless you really, started bleeding more?
Well, on an exam, your doctor could feel them. Yeah. Like I knew I had mine 10 years before. They just weren't causing any problems.
Okay.
Say you go through menopause, the way you did, Julie, which is just have a hysterectomy, or, naturally, but at some point, you're not going to have hormones, right? So are people just living without hormones? What does that feel like?
What is that like? Yeah.
Yeah. So even if you went through menopause and maybe took hormone replacement therapy, but then after age 60, you and your doctor decided, I'm going to come off of these. Yes, you would live the rest of your life without hormones.
Get specific on that. What does that mean? Because you said without your hormones, you're not yourself. So what does that mean?
But like I said, too, that after maybe around 3 years, women felt like they had kind of made it through the worst of those symptoms, like the hot flashes, the night sweats, all those things. They do not last the rest of your life.
Okay, that's a transition thing.
Yeah, that does not last permanently. So they feel like that kind of gets you through the worst part of it. And then you do live without the hormones. But your risk for osteoporosis, is still there. And that's why you need to think about bone health. That's still a big concern. And your doctor would talk to you about this, but supplements of vitamin D, calcium, and there's a drug called biphosphonates, and that's a class of drugs that prevent loss of bone density.
Yeah, because I was wondering, what's life like on the other side? Okay, so we've talked a lot about the transition time, and now what's post? What does that look like?
And I can't answer that because I'm not there either. Because I'm artificially.
Yes.
and none of us have bothered to ask our mothers.
She's still smiling right now.
So, I see a lot of happy older ladies. So I'm guessing that once you kind of get to the other side, things level off. And
I've seen a couple of dancing grandmas online lately that I'm really excited about. I'm hoping that's what it's like.
Right.
Me too.
Well, what about if we do have any husbands out there? What do they have to fear? Or what can they do to support their wife?
What do they have to fear? Their wife.
I don't know, not look at them like they're crazy. I don't know. Don't call them crazy.
Is there anything comparable for men? Like, do they have any male menopause?
Oh, I know, with the hormones, with testosterone.
This is kind of a sad statement. I did read that men in their 70s actually have more estrogen in their bodies than women.
You know what? Men get so sweet. Have you guys noticed, like, as men get older, they just get so sweet? And Bryce is like, that's because they don't have any testosterone.
And they have estrogen.
Yes, exactly.
We laugh because one time my dad on a trip, not wearing his glasses, took their dog's estrogen pill.
Oh, my so funny.
We always joke about it. Well, listeners, if you are on the other side and you want to give hope to all of us who are characterizing it as, the land we don't know anything about, please email us. Send us your stories. Give us encouragement so we can share with others.
I know.
Or I would love to hear from some people that have just naturally transitioned into menopause and it wasn't that bad. We just never hear about that.
I know.
Yeah, we need to hear the good ones.
That's right.
I think we've all heard enough of the bad ones. All right. Well, I feel more prepared. I wouldn't say excited at all about it, but I feel more prepared and there's less to fear.
Hopefully you know what questions to ask your doctor.
Yeah.
Because it is still up to you and your doctor to decide.
Right. And I can always just call you, Julie, because
true.
I won't remember any of these answers.
Julie has all the knowledge and she likes to do research. I don't really care to do research, so I'm really just going to call Julie. Obviously, we're aging, and I think that alone is not exciting. No. This whole discussion, it's under the umbrella of you're getting older, your body's changing, it will not stay the same. You cannot go backwards. No, you must move forward.
Right.
Well, and I think that's good to remember, that menopause isn't a disease. It's because we hear about it as such a negative, and youth is
it's highly
prized. We've probably gotten into our mind that we can just skip this phase. We can prevent it by being healthy and exercising and eating right, which, those all help, but no, you can't, you just can't skip it. It is going to happen. It's inevitable.
And I know that I've heard older women say, oh, I'm so glad to be all done with that. Or, I know you do get to a point where you're not thinking about it anymore. It's just something that happened. You're living your life. And I think it's just the decade around it where it's kind of on your mind.
To not understand it, to not know anything about it, to kind of stick your head in the sand just causes more anxiety. This is going to happen. By worrying about it, you're going to cause a bigger problem. Learning about it, finding out about it, and dealing with it as it happens.
Trying to get prepared. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you guys, it's time for our new favorite part of the show. I'm a fan of. All right. What are you guys fans of this week?
It's a candle I found out in Lubbock, Texas when I was out visiting my daughter. So I bought a couple. The last time she visited, she brought me 2 more. They are made by Antique Candle Company. They're soy candles, and the flavor that I love is called Fresh Cut Herbs.
Ooh.
And it is the best candle. And I love candles. I joke that my New Year's resolution every year is just to burn more candles because that's something I can do. Sometimes I'll just light it and then blow it out before people come because it just kind of lingers in the air.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. So that is my new favorite thing.
All right. And what's that called? Antique Candle Company?
Yes.
All right.
And they're just in little kind of mason jars with a silver lid, and they're all just white. The candles are just white.
Yes. Awesome.
Like that.
Mindy, what do you have for us?
All right. So I have a little life hack with your house. My husband took the screens off of our windows, and it is amazing how much better it looks. When you're inside the house, we have some really beautiful views out of our windows. And with the screen on, it was almost like it was fogged over. It just kind of takes the vitality, the vibrant colors, and it mutes everything just a little bit. So just by him taking the screens off the windows, I have been so much happier looking out my windows. It's just clear and bright and vibrant, and everything is just much more beautiful to enjoy. So take those screens off.
Yes. Now, what will you do if you want to open your window?
I don't. I have allergies.
Okay. Well, and
Yeah.
that's the thing is I took my screens off my windows. I think they're all off the downstairs if I'm remembering right. But anyways, I had taken them all off because I don't like to open the windows. Like I don't like that muggy air.
Yeah.
But I
right.
did leave them on upstairs because the times that our air conditioning has gone out, it's always been upstairs. And with no screens, it was really hard for the kids to sleep or put a box fan in the window or anything like that. But
Right.
yes, I did try that downstairs because I think it makes a great difference.
Yeah, we have
does.
ours off, and it really does make a difference from the outside. You don't really know what it is. It's maybe not something you could put your finger on, like what looks different about that house, but it
Right.
really does make a big difference.
It's a cleaner look.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I am a huge fan of listeners that send us personal emails. When I get an email like that and someone took the time to say how much they're enjoying our podcast and mention specific episodes and what they've gotten out,
Mhm.
I am a huge fan of those
Yes.
people. Thank you so
Yes.
much. It means so much to us. Podcasting is odd in that you don't always hear what people think of the product that you're putting out.
Right.
You know, you see that they're coming back every week to listen by the numbers, but you don't know what they're thinking. And it's so wonderful to hear that something you've said made a difference in someone else's life. So thank you so much if you've ever emailed us. And I encourage anyone that's been thinking of it, you will make our day.
Yes. Thank you. It is very encouraging.
For
Yes.
sure.
Yes. And if you don't want to take the time to email, anyone that's listening could take the time to rate and review us in iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. When you rate and review a podcast, it really does help other people find that podcast. So if you want other midlife women to be encouraged and listen to Midlife Matters, it would help us out so much if you went and rated and reviewed us. All you even have to do is just put a couple words. Love it. A great listen. Learn so much. It doesn't have to be lengthy. It can be short, but it really does help.
That's right.
If you don't like us, maybe don't review us.
Just post a smiley face emoji. We will love it.
All right. But we are seriously a fan of those that contact us. Thank you so much. All right, guys. We will be talking to you next week.
All right. Looking forward to it, girls. This was fun.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We're so glad you joined us today. If you're a fan of Midlife Matters, please tell a friend and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. We also hope that you'll follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. This is where you can see the things that we talk about on each episode, and we'd love the chance to get to know you better in the comments. You can also contact us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next Wednesday.